Welcome to the Reuters Events Insurance webinar on elevating the customer experience with robust data and AI strategies. I'm your moderator today, Lisa Wardlaw. Very excited to be hosting this esteemed panelist of just wonderful leaders in our industry, as always. But before we get into their introductions and teeing this up, I want to do a few housekeeping items. For all of you joining us and dialing in and connecting right now, this is being recorded. So if you did sign up to attend, you will get a recording after the event. I think it will be released tomorrow. And we do have a Q&A function. So if you look at your Q&A on your tab at the bottom, you can go ahead and start asking us questions. As the panelists are covering the topics and discussion, we will allot time at the end of the session to answer your questions. And if you don't have a question directly, or there's another one that was asked by somebody else, there is a way to vote up the question in terms of the way you can like it and send it to the top. So I'll be able to serve that up to our amazing panelists. So thank you so much for joining us. One other item that I wanted to mention is we're gearing up for Connected Claims USA, November 12th and 13th in Austin, Texas. If you haven't yet signed up, there is still opportunity to sign up to join Reuters in Austin, Texas, as well as they just achieved 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. And as part of that special celebration, there is a post going around right now where you too may be eligible to win 2 free passes. So check it out on LinkedIn, follow along and it's a very simple instructions in order to be eligible for that lottery drawing for free passes. Now over to our webinar. I can't wait to get into this discussion because we talk so much about technology and what's here with AI. But as an industry, we, of course, are always deeply focused on elevating the customer experience. And so I think what better purpose than to apply the tooling, the capabilities, the impetus upon us all right now as leaders to elevating the customer experience. So with that, joining us today is Paul Drennan, Chief Data Science Officer, The Hartford, Adam Fisher, Chief Product and Innovation Officer, ClearCover, Rachel Switchenko, VP Customer Relations, Plymouth Rock Assurance, and Kathy Lanning, Industry Go-to-Market VP of Salesforce. So thank you all so much for being guests here today. I wanted to tee up, let's get this started fun. This is a lot. There's a lot of moving pieces and parts to technology. Everyone is like, oh, I've got this thing, Copilot, and I've got ChatGPT, so I too can just use this. So there's lots of people demanding the immediacy of it. Yet as executives leading these roles in your organization, you have to have a plan and approach. And of course, I love the fact that we're talking like, how do we have that plan and approach for elevating the customer experience? So I'm going to kick it off with your introduction to all the guests that are listening today and your reaction to that prompt. How are you navigating this? And what's kind of maybe the top areas or areas of focus that you're prioritizing right now in terms of, structured chaos is what I'd like to call it. Maybe over to you, Kathy, for that initial response.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Lisa. Great to be here today with everyone tuning in. I'm Kathy Lanning. I lead our go-to-market strategy and growth strategies at Salesforce, and I have a unique role because I work so broadly across the industry. So I work with all of the top 10 carriers here in the United States and Canada, as well as the brokers. So I have this unique bird's eye view to kind of what's happening in the industry now. Where are folks investing? What problems are they trying to solve? How fast are they doing it? What do they view as critical capabilities? So it's a fascinating time to be in insurance, and it's a fascinating time to be in technology in insurance. I would say that there's a fun fact about AI adoption. It took 16 years to get 100 million people on a cell phone. It took 2 years to get 100 million people on a social media platform, and it took 2 months to get 100 million people using an AI platform, any AI platform, name your favorite. And so there's just such rapid adoption from a consumer perspective, unlike any other, I would just say, transformative technology we've ever seen before. And so what I see when it comes to customer experience is that a lot of carriers and brokers in the industry are recognizing that there's some value to be had here, and they're looking to test and learn. And you kind of ask, like, where within, or like, what are the use cases? Where are they thinking about these new tools? We're seeing a lot of it in sales, we're seeing a lot of it in marketing, and we're seeing a lot of it in service. And so we're seeing a lot of folks really test into very simple use cases like how can I take a chatbot script and have it summarized for a CSR? So if it happens in one channel, so that if the call comes in, CSR has the context. Hey, a CSR post-call summary so that the CSR can be focused on solving the problem, not on taking notes in the moment. And I'm seeing a lot around how to actually make CX is one thing, but if associates have a great experience, customers have a great experience. So internal use cases right now, specifically, how do I have metadata in my marketing content repositories? I'll be consistent so I can be more efficient in the use of my marketing assets. How do I think about campaign landing pages taking 6 days, 6 hours, not 6 weeks? So we're seeing a lot of focus on being able to meet the customer where they are through either asset creation or meet the customer where they are. I'm sorry, the associate where they are through tools that can help them be better at their job, especially if they're customer facing.
I love that. And you
Yeah.
just, I think, defined just even with that, this is big, right? This is not just one thing. Paul, over to you for your reaction to that as well as your intro.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here as well, and I agree with a lot of what Kathy said. From my position as the data science officer here, you know, we've been at this AI game for a long time. We like to think of ourselves as a 214-year-old startup here at the Hartford, and as a multi-line national carrier, AI as a fundamental tool for how we do many things. Customer experience being top of mind for us. It feels like something that we've been at for a long time, and had built a pretty reliable muscle at the responsibility of it, and how do you deploy it safely, and how do you scale it, and how do you monitor it and make sure that it stays on target, delivering the experience and providing the insight that you want. And then, like everyone else, Gen AI sort of jumped out of the bushes at us, and everybody went, okay, it feels so different. And it is different in that it unlocks a whole class of opportunities that I think we would have said maybe weren't realistic, or maybe were too hard or too expensive in the past. And you start to really think about all of these opportunities. And I would say, much like Kathy mentioned, really focusing in on what I'm calling a class of tools that I would just call assistants. Um, Copilot is obviously a word that gets used a lot. I'm deliberately using a different word because I like to be different, but assistants, things that can bring together a wide range of information, and package it in a way that fits into the choice I'm trying to make, whether that's on behalf of a customer or eventually exposing that directly to a customer. At the end of the day, the reason we do analytics is so that we make better choices. And you can see this class of applications that assist people by marrying up not just the old structured data and the workflow, but now the thought process and the surrounding payload of information, instructions, background information. How do I bring all that together, and how do I present that in a way that's natural, that feels conversational, it feels like the way I think, and so that it fits into the workflow very gracefully. And that's really the frontier as we see it at the moment, is how do we take what we've been good at, pricing discipline, triage and workflow, those types of things, and then add this new opportunity space around assistance and put those together so that they help us make better choices at the right point in time where we need to. And so that's really how we think about it today.
And it's so important to extend that into the kind of the organic nature of the organization, which we're going to get into strategy a little bit more in a minute. But Rachel, I'd love to know your intro to our audience, as well as like how you think about that. Is it like congruent, or is it like with a twist?
Yeah, no, thanks, Lisa. Love what Kathy and Paul have already said. I'm Rachel Swachenko. I'm VP of our customer solutions. And so to explain what customer solutions is briefly, it's really our service and underwriting groups. And so Kathy, I think to your point around the use cases in service, and really the use cases as we're thinking about who's touching that customer experience, definitely excited about it, definitely playing in that space. I think just the operations in general is a place where we're looking for consistency in that service delivery, right? Like, how do you help your newest employees, which we have a lot of them in those types of organizations? How do we help them understand the things that our tenured, experienced reps and underwriters know to deliver that to our customers and agents in a meaningful and impactful and positive manner? I think AI is just one of those tools that we can leverage. We definitely jumped on the bandwagon with ChatGPT being everywhere last year to create a tool for our internal folks, because I agree, I forgot already who said it. Great points all around already, but the employee is so important, right? Like, we're selling a promise in this industry. And so that promise is really delivered by people, and those people will do a better job if we make their jobs easier. So how do we help? And I think AI has a lot of use cases. Some of them are easy. I think the LLMs, like your large language models, are so much easier and tangible, but I think we're also playing with what we do with pictures on the underwriting side of things. And those are just, again, two of probably very, very many AI use cases and offerings from different vendors. And I think we know what the problems we have in each of our respective organizations, and they're ones that are timeless, and you're trying to solve in many different ways, whether it's process reengineering, automation, and now you have AI that is going to be more accessible, more affordable, and our customers are using it too. So, like, how we are able to use something that they get comfortable with to make the experience better for them.
I love that. I love the well-rounded nature of all this too, and how it all pulls together. So Adam, welcome to, I'm bringing you on to you've been so patiently waited. I promise I'll zig back to you. So we'll switch it up a little bit in terms of the order, but welcome to the panel. Would you mind introducing yourself and then reacting to this? Because I think it's such a pinnacle of how we're all thinking about this today.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it. So I was actually just doing a bunch of stuff in ChatGPT while I was waiting, just for fun. So no, I appreciate it. And to introduce myself, I'm Ann Fisher. I'm the Chief Digital Product Innovation Officer at ClearCover. We're a monoline auto carrier, live in about 20 states. And when we started, when a lot of people hear my title, they think I'm actually running an insurance product. I'm not. We actually see our digital experiences that our customers interact with as a product unto themselves, because that is where the world is and where it is moving, especially in insurance. Of customers really want those digital interactions, and they want them to work. Soon, we had that great stat at the beginning from Kathy about the cell phone, and the cell phone really revolutionized customers' expectations of what it's like to interact with you, right? So, Apple, Google did an amazing job giving folks really easy user experiences to interact with in their pocket at any moment. And now they expect that every interaction they have with every brand and every company is going to be that easy, and it's going to work just like that. And so our perspective from an AI point of view, we first start with the customer, and we say, what customer problem are we solving? And then how does that help our business? So instead of just saying, well, we can build this AI, we can build this efficiency and help with this margin, or, help with this KPI, we first say, well, what do customers really want, right? And so I think that's why when you take a look at the use cases that we've really zoomed in on, especially in the claims and the customer service perspective, customers obviously just want a claim to be handled quickly, efficiently, and they want to be made whole as soon as they can, right? So that's why we've applied AI to allow us to pay, almost 10% of our physical damage claims under 30 minutes, right? And so that's what a customer wants, right? They want to go into their app, they want to submit photos, submit details of their loss, and they want to get paid as soon as possible. And so that's a perfect opportunity for AI to help us automate that process. When the claim's a little bit more complicated, right? Well, there's a lot of information that has to be gathered, and customers are expecting that even that information can be done digitally. The thing is, claims can be very complicated. And so that's what the power, some of the power of the LLMs have unlocked is usually you can only take statements through an adjuster because they have all this internal knowledge, and they know how to go through the decision tree of what questions to ask, and based on the answer, follow up with question X, Y, Z. Well, LLMs have taken that reasoning ability and brought it to the forefront for customers. So that's why we built an LLM tool that's a digital statement collection tool during our F&OL process, so that customers can just easily answer questions and the LLM can do the same reasoning that adjuster could, right? And on the servicing side, customers expect 24/7 servicing. Well, as a smaller auto startup, we can't afford that. But by introducing a vendor LLM bot, we can do that. We can have those interactions 24/7, and they can have meaningful interactions. And that's the fascinating thing about what's happened in the last 18 to 24 months when it comes to the LLMs is that, yeah, sure, there's always been customer service bots. There's always been that type of technology, but it was very tree-based. It was very rote. It's very mechanical. And I don't know about you, but the vast majority of the time you use those, they just didn't seem to really be answering your questions.
Hashtag representative.
Exactly. And it's like, and it's fascinating because as soon as we've launched this kind of technology, you see that they're talking to it like a computer. And that's what customers do because they're used to really bad chatbots. And they're used to saying, well, I can't give them a sentence like I'm talking to a human.
Right.
I just have to give the bot like a 1-2 word, kind of like this is what I want. And it's fascinating just to see how bad chatbots have kind of conditioned users to interact with it in a poor way, which is actually not great for an LLM. And so it's the more customers get used to, oh, I can actually speak to this as if I was talking to a human. We now get a lot of chatbot interactions where at the end of the interaction, the customer is thanking the chatbot as if they're a human, right? And they're like, oh, thank you so much. Thanks for your help today. And you were talking to a computer. And that's what this power of these LLMs have really unlocked is this ability to interact in a natural way. But at the end of the day, the customer is getting their problem solved on their time schedule when they want, and we're able to provide that, whereas before we weren't. And that's really powerful to me.
I think, Adam, one of the things that you've been hitting on that everyone has hit on is that there's a macro theme here, which is this is not a point solution. This is not the way we handle digital, which is make something go incrementally better, make it incrementally faster, make it incrementally better. And I mean, I was head of digital transformation for a while. So like, I even had that in my title. And I'm like, ooh, that was a little painful. But the reason why I'm saying this is I think what we're all trying to articulate here, and you've all identified it, which is there's an ultimate business strategy at play here, which is how do we think about our business within the context of we have much more powerful capabilities than we had before. And there's a quote that was just released. I won't name the vendor, but it's one of, the CEO has been at many big technology vendors. And it says, your imperative right now is to redesign every single solitary workflow, the way you do business with generative AI as a construct. And whether you end up using it or not. So what I want to tee it over to this amazing panelist group is business strategy or point solution. How are you all thinking about this as your business strategy, and then maybe pull customer experience into that? And Paul, I'm looking straight at you. I'm gonna tee this one over to you. We're gonna switch the order up a little bit.
Yeah, it's obviously top of mind for all of us. And I would say that one of the big shifts that we've experienced and we're really accelerating now is to get away from I've got a workflow and it's an orchestration of capabilities and patterns of thinking. And I don't like ultimately what's happening. I don't like the answers. I don't like the speed. I don't like the cost. I don't like something about it. And we go, all right, well, what's the thing in the workflow that's making me most frustrated? And let me go make that thing better. And we're pivoting away from that to what do I want this experience to be end to end? And how do we think about achieving that, not in a component replacement way, but in a full system way? And then whether it's generative AI or predictive AI or traditional rules-based systems, how do I insert that left to right throughout that entire workflow to achieve the speed we want and the accuracy we want and the experience we want, and then how do we do that in a way that is adaptive, because none of these things stay static, right? Adam mentioned just the change in customer expectations, and that feels like we're all watching that and reacting to it, and it's moving quicker and quicker all the time. And so we can't build monolithic systems. They have to be flexible. They have to adapt quickly. And And I'll use that as just a moment to insert one of the watch out items with all of this AI is that these algorithms they drift over time. You know, they're trained on experiences, and tomorrow won't look like yesterday. And so there's a real duty that comes with the deployment of these, which says I got to watch them and I got to keep after it and I got to retrain and bring them back on target. And so, as you imagine, a system now where I haven't just done point replacement, but I've done something really comprehensive, and there's algorithms and data flow all the way through it. How do we build the right mechanisms to watch it, to measure it, to monitor it, and then to trigger the right corrective action when it starts to drift so that we can make sure that it keeps fulfilling the promise that we made it? I like the way Rachel said that, ultimately that is what we do. We're selling a promise here. And so we got to be vigilant about that. But that is the strategy, is to look at our core systems end to end and redesign them. I'm not even going to say re-engineer them, but really redesign them with an AI forward approach, being very conscious of the duties that all of that AI brings with it as we do so.
Yeah, you're getting on, and Rachel, I'm gonna come to you next, so just tee up for it. Paul, I've started working on cognitive. So back in the day when we were doing all the things you just articulated, I got into decision engines, but now I'm into cognitive, neurological, like dynamic decisioning on top. That's not AI based, but can sit on top of all these AI reimagined, because to your point, nothing's static. And so it's a total business strategy. And to your point, you can't look at it in these fragmented ways that we used to maybe try to do digital. You've got to be much more aware. So Rachel, over to you in terms of the business strategy and the emphasis on customer experience.
Yeah, and I think I am definitely going to play off of a lot of the things, Paul, you just said, just because I'm nodding along. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to understand what we don't even know, right? Like, we are in a highly regulated industry, and I think we are all moving faster or trying to move faster than that regulation can do. And so making like responsible decisions, the governance, it's different than some of our IT projects where you test and you make sure it goes in and then you set it and forget it until something touches up against that. It's the exact point you just made, Paul, around you have to keep maintaining it. And I think that's something that we're still learning, because we're newer on that journey and seeing some of those things. And so making sure you have a tight governance around it. And obviously we want to think about things AI forward, but there's still a place for your data and your people and the different elements that will make that end-to-end solution work better in this new environment and this go forward. But with the lean towards, yeah, how do we infuse this in an easier way, in a more impactful way, in a more consistent way? I think on top of like the governance and just understanding what's happening there, like, what data are we giving it to ingest? How do we feel about that? How do we feel about any customer data we're leveraging? And so I think there's a lot of risk factors that you're playing with when you're choosing where to put it, how to use it, while still moving quickly. And I think we have a laundry list of things we're working on now, thinking about 2025 plan, because 'tis the season in the summer. And so just trying to think about that, the roadmap, and really where we're going, and then knowing that in another 2 years, we're probably going to be, you're just going to constantly re-engineer. And so it's really shifting our mindset a little bit.
Totally. Adam, over to you on this one.
Yeah, man, I think what's interesting is it's the opportunities are so transformational that I think it can become a little easier to green light some of the projects and some of the things you can do, right? So there's plenty of things you can choose before, even on the Gen AI side, there's plenty of things you can do to increase efficiency within your teams. And there's plenty of ways you can implement technology and digital to help with that. But it always did seem incremental, right? And you can say, all right, well, maybe I can shave, 4 basis points here on a, on a combined ratio or on a servicing ratio or LE or whatever the case may be. And hey, that could be meaningful at scale, but boy, it's going to take 9, 12, 18 months. And is it really worth it? And there's going to be a lot of effort. Should we do this? The opportunities before us now can be so transformational that you're talking about way larger impacts. And I think that's really interesting. However, having said that, especially for maybe some of the larger incumbents, you have to have a lot of fortitude to make those decisions because it can be very impactful to your teams and it can be very impactful to the humans you have on the ground. That's where we're a little bit more fortunate because as we scale, it just means our hiring might scale and there's not really disruption to people who are currently on staff. But for larger incumbents who have a large staff and you're going to bring a transformational technology to bear, it can mean having to make some very difficult decisions. And so there's a risk reward element to it, but there's also a huge opportunity, and it's no longer this incremental, 2 to 4 basis points here or there. It is transformational to your bottom line, but it means you have to be willing to take those risks and you have to be willing to make those very hard decisions.
Yeah, and Kathy, how are you thinking about that with both your role as well as the way you advocate and help customers with their thoughts on this?
Yeah. I'll just add a few thoughts, really great thoughts from all the panelists and a couple additional. So, McKinsey does a global survey on artificial intelligence. They just released it in May, and they said it showed that 65% of, participants in the insurance category are already testing and using artificial intelligence. So this is a technology that is very much already envisioned to be an enabler of an overarching enterprise business strategy. And so the investment is there, it's already happening. And when you take a step back and say, so what are those business strategies? And you start with an outcomes-based mindset, it's always, profitable growth underneath that, which is driven by, I need some efficiency. So cost takeout, customer experience, operational consistency and intelligence. There might be a couple more in there. And so we're seeing a lot of clients start with that end in mind. And then look for ways to think, like Paul mentioned, not with intelligence as a point solution, but how do I infuse it into the flow of work? Because that's where the decisioning gets better, where the experience is influenced and arguably better, where the associate's experience is simpler and faster. And you start to deliver on all of those outcomes that we mentioned in harmony. The only other thing I would add is that, we're seeing a lot of folks, and Rachel took us there, really think through the risk and compliance piece of this. And so I'm seeing a lot of our clients really balance and take, while viewed very transformational, and wanting to put the foundational building blocks of transformation in place today, right now, it's happening, right? So if someone tells you they're not being truthful with you, it is happening. But doing so in a way that's really intentional so that there is governance, risk management, because compliance and regulatory standards are not yet obvious, but will become so over the years. And so having the governance and having the agility in the context of, one platform so that you can, again, be agile is one of those design things that I think that is pretty predominant. And when you kind of think about it that way, it's easy to track back, the investments, the testing, right? And the outcomes that are desired. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that, the emphasis on governance and ethics and frameworks. And at Future Insurance USA, FOI USA, recently we had the superintendent of the Department of Regulation for New York on, and she was talking a lot about the frameworks and the provability. So, right, like there's a lot that needs to happen, but I think the consensus is it's not a wait and see. It's like, how can we insulate, regulate, and have proper standards, governance, and procedures. And I think in particular, as it relates to our customers, right?
That's
So
right.
I'm going to kick this over, Rachel. I think I'm going to start off with you on this one. How and what considerations, and we've talked about it a lot, but I want to connect two threads together. What considerations, when you think about applying AI within the customer experience, and how do you balance that human and technology? Because nobody is all tech, no human. I don't think there's anyone that's taking that approach, but how do you think about balancing that in your role?
Yeah, I think I had shared with this group previously, I have come to very much appreciate that our customers in this space want to talk to a human in certain interactions. I think it is wonderful that AI can fill that hole in many situations, but insurance remains complex and it can be emotional. And there are times where, yes, they want a representative, they want to get there. And so making sure as you're building for optionality and saying, okay, AI is here and it's going to allow it to be easier for our employees to engage, right? It levels the playing field a bit by filling some gaps. It also can be the only thing that a customer uses if that's their preference. But how do we make sure that it doesn't get in the way? How do we make sure there are like feedback loops between the agents that are hearing feedback with the technology and who manages it, ensuring that our staff understands where they play in that entire journey so that they understand the workflow. I think there's like we're even using similar to the Kathy, I think you mentioned summarization, right? A lot of times our customers are going to go online before they come to us. And how do we understand that entire journey and surfacing that to the rep? And so really just helping them understand the entire workflow. And I guess I'm of the mindset that the tech is not really going to take all of our jobs, right? I think the person that can leverage it is going to be the person that is you're going to want on your team. You're going to want more people who understand how to use it, who understand how to work with it, who can make us better. And so I think that as folks get more comfortable and play even in their personal lives with it, that can translate to work and being a better partner with the technology.
And so I want to contrast this a little bit, like, yes. And then Adam was saying, okay, so, and I think it's still like the same in human in the loop, Adam, but like, I think it's an interesting scale, grow, expand, optimize. So like, I'm going to give you a little twist to this question with the, how do you apply it to customer? And I love the fact that you have this as a product itself, Adam. So maybe click in on that and then think of it as, you know, an alternative to volume, like throwing bodies at it. Like, how do you all think about that in like customer service and experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is that you're going to have a very different range of customers, you know, and Rachel was mentioning you have customers who want to talk to humans. You have customers who are okay with only the bots. I actually think that that percentage of folks who only want to talk to humans will decrease proportionately with how good the bots improve over time. So at the end of the day, what does a customer really want? They want their problem solved accurately and quickly, right? And so right now, I believe there's this level of skepticism among customers who think that I can only get that if I have a human, and therefore they're going to bypass and go straight to the human. The more the bots show competency to answer at the same accuracy and competency as a human can, the more customers will embrace that, right? So what do you do? What do you do with the fact that you might have great humans who have been doing really good work for you? Well, number one is you have to first take a step back and say, what is their superpower? What is it that they're bringing to the table? What is it that really bring, you know, that you're really harnessing as an organization? And then how do we allow them to do more of that and do less of what the bot can do on their behalf, right? So some of that will be the, you know, Paul's talking about like the intelligence and the assistance or co-pilot, right? So some of that will be, hey, how can we have these bots help them in the thing that they're really good at? Others will be, how can we have the bots to take all the stuff that isn't within their wheelhouse, isn't within their you know, superpower? So, you know, back to one of the things we've been working on, we continue to improve on, is our digital statement collection LLM. So right now, as you know, you file a claim, you need to get a statement with your adjuster. We're trying to have that entire interaction encapsulated through an LLM conversation with a customer, right? Now, our adjusters are good at this. They have to be. It's a key part of their job. Having said that, that's not their superpower. right? That's not, sure, it's an important part of the job, but it's not really their superpower. Their superpower is taking the knowledge they have of how to efficiently adjudicate a claim and do so in a way that is fair to the customer, gets the customer their payout that they are entitled to, but also follows the policy contract, right? That's their superpower. Well, yes, they're good at this job, and there are some people who are better at it than others. They're good at this task, but there's no reason that they have to keep doing it. And as we scale and grow, we're going to have more claims. And as we have more claims, we're going to have to make sure we're adjudicating them and handling them and settling them and adjusting them in the proper way. And so let's have them focused on more of that, right? And so now that's really, to me, what the future looks like, is to say, for the folks who are in your organization today, what value are they actually providing? Even though they might have a lot of tasks where they provide value, what's their key value, and how we can A, make sure they're always focused on that value, and B, use AI, use other technology to ensure that they can provide that value more efficiently.
Paul, I think that's a great springboard over to you on this, because I see you nodding a lot. I can tell that you've been thinking about this a lot as well.
Yep.
How are you navigating this in your role?
We do think about it a lot, and I was smiling when Adam was talking about superpowers, because when the term co-pilot started to catch on and become so popular, we said, well, we don't want to go with co-pilot. And so there was a fun conversation we had where we said, well, what if we call them all sidekicks? Because this is an and, not an or moment. It's the human and the AI and the tools and the data and all of that. And we love the term sidekick, because it's like an old superhero story where, you've got the superhero and the sidekick. And in that paradigm, the human is the superhero and the AI is the sidekick. And I kind of love that mental model. And it goes to Adam's comment about superpower. And when we think about the customer experience and the superpower that the person brings, and I'll reflect back on something Rachel said, like, we're showing up in someone's time of need. Like, customer resiliency in this moment is something's happened. Maybe it's a claim event and something really bad has happened, or maybe I'm thinking about I'm a small business owner. I'm thinking about expansion or getting into a new line of business. So something's happened, and there's this need for resiliency, this need for safety. That's when the insurance company really shines. And in that moment, the thing the AI will probably struggle to do for a long time is to be empathetic. And that feels like the human superpower in the equation. So how do we get this and moment where we get that superhero person who's going to have empathy and intuition and be able to anticipate needs, maybe unspoken needs, right? The large language model is going to do a brilliant job of responding to what you say. It's going to struggle at what you didn't say, and that's where the human really shows up. And so that's how we think about the partnership, is the superpower of the person being that intuition and empathy. And then I agree with Adam's point that the AI as an assistant or a sidekick in this context that can take those things that are more routine and predictable and do them in an efficient way. That's where the and really comes to life.
Yeah, Paul, I was just I was actually dealing with a customer experience moment yesterday myself. And you know how it is when you're on the other side of the phone and you're calling into insurance customer service line. And I felt so bad for the rep trying to help me, because she was not empowered in that moment. She didn't have the power of the AI summaries or the LLMs, and she was trying to be empathetic, but there was no way she could research the volumes and amount of things she needed to research to answer that question. And I could hear her being so frustrated, not with me, but with her own inability, because she's deeply empathetic. She wanted to help. And she was kind of like, I can't do more. And that really frustrated her. So one of the things I've often found very interesting about this human in the loop, and Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you next, and this powering, giving them the cape to be those superheroes, is that most customer service and operations people are wired to solve problems. That's probably why they got in this to begin with. Their frustration has been dealing with the cards that they have, and they haven't always been And that's not because, you know, like, hey, this is all coming down for most of us, but they haven't always had the octane, like maybe their cape was more like low fidelity cape versus octane cape. You know, maybe they couldn't quite do Superman and punch through the atmosphere, but I think they're always empathetic and they've always wanted to be. So the adoption curve on this in my mind is really, really, really high with humans, because they're like, listen, I've been trying to solve this problem and now maybe I can solve this problem. So Kathy, I'd love to hear how you're thinking about that, because I see you nodding as well in terms of really putting that cape on the superhero, if you will. I'm gonna stick with your analogy, Paul and Adam.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple comments. Great. I mean, great conversation, but I would agree, you know, no one ever thought that their superpower was clicking through multiple screens and systems so they could actually like answer a question in a service or claims environment. You know, like people will take pride in their ability to do that quickly because they have to. So to the degree they got tool, but that's not what they're trying to do, right? So the more you have digital tools and intelligence to support that, the more empathetic and caring they can be. And like, you know, so oftentimes it's like, is it data and digital, or is it empathy and care? And my perspective is like, it's one empowers the other. And if you don't have really good tools and data and intelligence, then it's very difficult to be empathetic because you're busy wrestling with your technology. I would just offer kind of, you know, two other thoughts. You know, when you think about intelligence, I like to think about it from a jobs to be done perspective. So as much as we've just talked about the CSR and like the phone, I would argue like not never has anyone woken up and been like, I want to call my insurance company today. I am so excited to change that beneficiary. I really want to see what my cost of my coverage and why my rate increased. Like, I'm excited to call. There's increasingly fewer and fewer people that walk this earth that are excited to call an insurance company. And so the power of artificial intelligence in digital channels is a very real thing. And it's actually empowering for the customer experience. It oftentimes, and increasingly so, is the first channel of preference, not just for shopping, but for servicing as well. And the degree that you have a simple administrative task that can be accomplished, people will choose to, an increasingly enormous amount of people will choose the channel to be digital for very simple tasks. And so we're seeing things like chat bots and things like personified chat bots so that someone doesn't feel like there's a trade-off when they choose to work digitally. And then we're seeing there are some complicated tasks that require advice or are a unique point in time, like a first notice of loss. And that's where the capacity and the digital tools are for kind of the human care. So thinking about how to make those trade-offs where you're making investment with intelligence, digitally versus human, connecting it so it's omni-channel and personified along the way are just some of the design principles we would offer. One last thought, just to take it in a slightly different direction, but the interaction between humans and technology is also the fact that artificial intelligence is going to create new jobs. So think about it. Today, you've got a new job posting. It's called a prompt engineer. 12 months ago, we were not talking about what that meant. We've talked a lot in this discussion about the power of LLMs, but the power of understanding how to engineer the correct prompt that actually trains the LLM and actually gets better responses is a really powerful thing. And we're starting to see new jobs, new capabilities infused through the organizations and into these workflows in order to get the most of the technology. So just wanted to kind of start to bring that forward in the conversation too.
Yeah, you're right. We started talking about that late in the fall 2023, and prompt engineering is probably the most, if not one of the most, like, we're going to get to, I want to address a couple of these questions, but you're totally right, Kathy. Like the art of getting ChatGPT to tell you something sensible is very much based on what you ask it. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out still applies even in AI. So now I want to take a couple of questions. I'm going to tee this one up. We've talked a lot about AI, both, you know, Paul was talking about more traditional AI and generative AI. But at the end of the day, you know, I don't believe most people are creating all of their AI in-house. I'm going to take this question down here. How much are people leveraging hyperscalers, AI as a service, multi-model, you know, like I'm working on something where we're leveraging AI as a service and their models are trained and there's like 14, 15 different LLMs coming together and it's compete challenger. And And maybe I'll start with Adam. I don't think I've started with you yet, so I might start with you on this one, and then we can swing back around because I see Paul leaning in on this one too. But I'd be curious to answer this for our audience. How are you thinking about this? Is it a difference of a traditional buy, lease, rent strategy that we would have had with technology? How are people thinking about AI, as a service with all of these things we've been talking about? Like, where do you get it from? What store do you go to? And you don't need to name the store.
Yeah, so we're built so there's a certainly a build versus buy conversation to have anytime you do this. And so for some of the stuff we've been building, so the digital statement collection, we also have a claims co-pilot for our adjusters that they're able to use via Slack through a Slack bot, helps answer a lot of questions and even like draft responses to customers, things like that. We're building in a way that's very model agnostic, so that it'd be very easy to turn around and switch out whether you're using Amazon, Azure, whatever the case may be. We make it really easy to be model agnostic. And look, with all of these large third-party models, whether you're using Amazon, Azure, etc., all of the enterprise plans allow you to segment your data, so they're not using it to retrain. There's not going to be anything that's going to be proprietary to go out. I know that's one of the parts of the question as well. If you're on an enterprise plan, your data is not going to get out into the wild. Just like if you're on an enterprise AWS or a Google Cloud plan, you're not gonna have your data go out to third parties, right? So that's not a concern. Now, if you're just typing into where the real concern is, you have to find how you can have governance within your organization when your employees are just going to ChatGPT and going straight to the web and not using an enterprise plan there, and they're just typing something that could be proprietary to your company. That stuff can get into the wild, that stuff can leak. And that's where you have to, the more you're proactive as an organization to when employees just want to experiment on their own, the more you're proactive to let them know what the rules of engagement are and or start buying enterprise plans and integrating them into workflows, that's where you can get into trouble. But when you're building the kind of stuff that we're building, that's not a concern, really, the data being used for training, et cetera.
Yeah. Paul, I'm gonna also ask you to weigh in on this one if you don't mind.
I definitely don't mind, and I agree with what Adam said. The things that were going through my head as you were teeing up the question is, and I'm going to assume that many people have had this experience over the last 2.5 years, which is at the start, we're all just trying to figure out how do we do this. And then when you start to feel like, okay, I understand the pattern and I'm starting to get reasonably good at prompting, and I can manage my hallucination, and I can get to something that feels like it's reliable enough that I can put it to work somewhere. Then we all started pivoting from experimentation to how do I bring this into the world as a true capability, as a tool on the desk that's actually solving a problem. And the world hasn't stood still in terms of the capability, but a year ago we were all using GPT because that was the thing that you could get an API to, and so we were bringing our problems to the model. But now, as we're halfway through 24, starting to have capabilities where we can bring models to the problem, and we can start to refine what the right fit is. And I've said internally, this year it's all about, like, can we get to reliable, safe? I'll use this in a production context. But by this time next year, the total cost of ownership is going to be a real factor for us. And how do we think about the right trade-offs that I need to make between accuracy and cost and operational performance? Can I afford the latency of a hyperscaler model, or can I get reasonable performance out of a smaller model I can host myself, and I can control for latency and performance in an operational context? And and open source models allow me to fine tune and do other things where I have more refined control. And so as we thought about that from a strategy standpoint, access to a model garden where we have choice becomes really, really critical. And so I would say model garden, bring the right model to the problem, and then think about the total cost of ownership, and not just token cost, but how do I retrain this, and am I getting the right price performance trade-off? All of that stuff. I think we're all probably in similar places on that learning curve as we get through this. But that's rapidly becoming the focal point.
Yeah, and you're hitting on, and I love the fact that you called it a model garden, because I started looking at federated and sustainable, like, so with machine learning, but like, how do we not move data everywhere as well, Paul? So like the models as well as the movement, because back in the day, right, we were trying to move and collate, like everything had to go one direction. And now it's like, okay, how can we afford this 3 years out, 2 years out? Which, Rachel, I'm going to tee it over to you, because you were bringing up the, I didn't invoke it at the time, but the horizon planning, you know, in concept of like, what's today, what's tomorrow, what's out there. How are you thinking about the Rent an AI engine? Are you thinking about that? You know, like how are you approaching that?
Yeah, I don't think my answer is that different than what Paul or Adam shared. I would say, I think when we started, it was, okay, we want to control this because we don't really know what's happening. And then 6 months later, it's, wait, there are a lot of options. There are a lot of good partners that we can do this with to get there faster. We don't have the skill or capacity to build everything in-house. And so it's kind of figuring out where our expertise lie and where we can leverage our folks to build something versus who's the right other partner to get us there with a different model. So I think very much the same way that Paul and Adam were describing it. It is a rapidly changing evolution, and I would say even what we built last year, I think to Adam's point of being able to plug in and out of different models, I think we're already at that phase where it's, okay, we like this one now better than where we built it off of. So how do we go through that, and where does that sit in prioritization? But it's changing so quickly that you need to be able to be nimble enough to do that and still deliver the results that you want.
And so Kathy, how are you thinking about that? And then I'm gonna pivot for a minute after you answer that, because we're in our 8-minute countdown mark.
Oh, well, actually, I'm fascinated by so we two are talking a lot about how to think about total cost of ownership. I mean, LLMs are not free, right? Creating your own is an investment in, you know, a lot of different ways. Paul, Adam, and Rachel, like, how are you guys thinking about total cost of ownership today? Curious just to kind of hear how that conversation is being structured in your 4 walls.
Can jump in because this is honestly like the topic I spend most of my time thinking about. And with predictive AI, the cost was not in the build, it's in the sustain.
Yeah.
And what we see with generative is it's a multiple of that. And it comes in a couple of different cases. Drift comes from more directions here. The content can drift, the use case can drift. And then remediation is quite a bit more burdensome, particularly when we need subject matter experts to perform validation, and that's often a limited resource. And the opportunity cost of using them to do this is high. And so how do we think about that? And so I'll be fascinated to see how we all respond. I'll say, the carriers, the vendor partners, how do we all respond to that reality and start to pull some of that burden and cost out? Because it's gonna be a factor in how many of these you can build and sustain over time. And I don't think that's top of mind yet, because we're all climbing a learning curve, but it's going to get to be a real important factor. And so I do think about, what does it take to stand one up, but what does it take to monitor it and retrain it? And what's the unit cost of the people who do that? Because it feels different now. It feels like I'm going to really highly calibrated minds and asking them to stare at something and say, yep, that's right, that's not right. That is a burdensome task. And I'll throw this out there just as a provocative question. 10 years from now, when we've all had AI, where do those experts come from?
Yeah.
Who spent 10 years learning all of the new, right?
Yeah.
Because they've been using it, right? So I think we got to think about this for the long term.
You need to read the book, Fuzzies and Techies, Why the Liberal Arts Will Rule the Digital World. But it's talking about the mind. I'm sure you've read it. If you haven't, it's a great book. Scott Hartley wrote it. But he's talking about he wrote it, I think 10 years ago, but he's talking about the mindset of the social sciences and applied and all this kind of sitting around this world. It was digital, but clearly I think it applies to AI too. So you might have the musicians at Yale while sitting on top of all this and doing some of that work in addition to just the scientists. I think it's an interesting thought. Okay. With that, I don't know if we've got to start wrapping it up, Kathy. So in terms of the total cost of ownership, we'll have to continue this discussion offline. I love the question though, as a former CFO, nothing was more infuriating to me than looking at the IT spend. And I'm like, where's the total cost of ownership? So as we think through that with AI, Paul, you given some amazing insights, which is it's going to be very, very, very costly. So can we sustain and maintain what we put in, and what are the best economic decisions? And there's a lot of economic theory around this too. So super exciting. But as we wrap it up, and sorry for the questions that we couldn't get to, there's so many great questions. I think we touched a little bit on hallucinations and corridoring. Paul hit on that. So for the questions coming in on that. But what I'd really like to do to wrap it all up with our guests is I'm going to go, Adam, I'm going to start with you. We're going to go all the way back from where we started. Just a quick 1-minute call to action. What would you leave all the attendees with as something they should take from this? Start, stop, or continue.
Data. So, there was quite a few questions around hallucination and accuracy that came in. And, Lisa, real quick, you were talking to a rep, they got frustrated when they couldn't help you. AI bots want to do the same thing. They're eager to help you, except when they can't help you, instead of getting frustrated, they just make something up. They take data and they just kind of try to put data together that they shouldn't, right? The more data you have, the more you document knowledge base, your standard operating procedures, et cetera, the better, the more those hallucinations go away and the more accurate questions come up too.
Awesome.
So data.
All about the data.
Content. That's the key to a lot of this.
All right, Rachel, over to you for your 1-minute call to action.
I will be brief, and I will say, if you are not playing around with this technology, go do it. The more you understand it personally, the easier it will be to bring ideas to your organization and to understand what the capabilities are, what prompt engineering is, like all of those nuance that will become just second nature to us in a matter of months, years. Play with it, figure it out, and it'll get the creative juices flowing.
I love that. Paul, what's yours?
I would advise people to think of our future as an AI-empowered workforce. It's every job family. This isn't an exclusive club. And I would echo what Rachel says. Don't be afraid. Get in there and mix it up, because the future will be, we're all going to have a sidekick. And
I think you're going to be quoted on that now. There was some chats going on Sidekick. You've got that one. Kathy, what's your wrap up?
I would just end with a lot of optimism. I mean, we're living in and working through an incredible time right now. If you think back to when the telephone was invented, what in like the 1870, 1880, like the cell phone was not something that could be easily contemplated. And I think that's a similar transition we are with AI. Like, I think that we all know that this is going to be an incredible tool. I think in a very short time, if you look at how many times artificial intelligence is in earnings reports, I think, very soon that'll be like saying I use electricity for my business. Like, of course you use intelligence in your business. And I think that we are kind of the molders of what that will look like and how that will be utilized across the industry right now. So it's an exciting time.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. What an amazing discussion, invigorating. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you to our audience for staying tuned. My last statement would be stay curious, stay informed, connect with all these amazing leaders on LinkedIn to follow their content and their thought leadership. And thank you to Reuters for hosting this webinar today. Appreciate it and hope to see you all at Connected Claims USA in Austin. Thank you.